After hanging up, my phone buzzed twice. I glanced at the screen to find a message from Julian. Last-minute overtime at work. Don't wait up. Then the cute avatar labeled Pinky popped up. Mel. No need to leave the door open for me tonight. Got plans, K? Followed by a winky, you know the drill, sticker. I clutched my phone by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the pair below embrace hungrily the moment they stepped outside. A bitter tide surged in my throat as I choked back the nausea welling up from my gut. Not long ago, Virginia told me she was dating a guy who was 1.8 meters tall, well-endowed but rough in bed, always leaving her back sore and aching. At the time, I was genuinely happy for her and quipped, bigger is better, completely missing the mockery and sarcasm lurking in her gaze. It wasn't until 2 days ago when I accidentally caught them in the act. There stood the bickering pair I knew, secretly entangled in a sloppy, saliva-threaded kiss behind my back. Tears streamed down my face before I could blink. Chapter 1. I covered my mouth outside the door, biting my lips until blood welled up to restrain the urge to burst in. Listening to the noises escaping from within, my eyes burned crimson. So this was why my meek, dutiful boyfriend kept inventing overtime excuses. Roleplay costumes with sheer stockings. No wonder she'd complained about soreness. I closed my eyes, though I tried desperately to hold myself together, my body trembling beyond control. To friends and family, Julian was the perfect boyfriend, and Virginia was not only my college roommate but also my best friend. No one would believe they were sleeping together. Yet, I was the one crushed by their double betrayal. When I didn't reply, Julian called. Staring at the flashing screen, I wiped the tears from my eyes and answered with forced calm. Baby, why aren't you answering my texts? I absent-mindedly made an excuse, gripping the phone tightly, making one last attempt. What should I do, hubby? Fin said she's meeting up with that guy tonight. Should I tell her to come home? Julian's breathing grew slightly heavier. I couldn't tell if it was guilt or if Virginia had shown him some new tricks. She's an adult who knows her own business. Why are you so hung up on her? I intentionally prolonged the conversation while his breathing grew, increasingly labored. When he finally cracked, he muttered something came up at work and hung up. I stared at the disconnected phone, the final thread of love in my heart snapping silently. Since they were so determined to be a cheating bastard and a backstabbing whore, I'd make sure the whole world saw their true colors. Julian returned the next morning with a bag of my favorite soup dumplings from our usual spot. He carelessly set the breakfast on the table. Got this for you. Eat it before it cools. I didn't say anything, nor did I touch those Xylong Bao. A moment later, a man's voice drifted from the bedroom. Baby, where are your clothes? Julian entered the living room and noticed the suitcase at my feet. His face tightened briefly before he forced an airy tone. Planning a trip? Perfect timing. I've got heaps of vacation days saved. Let's just take it all at once and make it count. That's exactly when Virginia walked in. Travel? Julian, are you taking Melly out? I'm so jealous. Poor little single me, left all alone at home. She pouted, and before I could speak, she latched onto my arm with a sugary smile. Be sweet, Melly, take pity on me and bring me along? Julian's face darkened. Mind your own business. Quit being a third wheel. Virginia shot back. I'm not tagging along with you. Melly's my girl, humph. Then she clung to my arm, pleading with puppy dog eyes. Zheng, please. You couldn't possibly abandon your best friend in this empty apartment, could you? I watched their little act, the bitterness in my heart twisting into something cold and sharp. How utterly ridiculous they were. When Virginia came here looking for a job and told me she had nowhere to stay, I kindly let her stay at my place. When Julian first heard the news, the disgust flashing across his face looked utterly genuine. I had to coax him endlessly, preparing his favorite meals and giving massages, before he finally relented. Who could have guessed that those two, who clashed every time they met, were actually tearing through the sheets behind my back? I withdrew my arm from Virginia's grip and said casually, It's not a vacation. The company is sending me to Nanching for a year-long training program. When I return, there'll be a promotion and salary increase waiting. This time, I caught the flicker of envy in Virginia's eyes. My heart chilled. I treated her as a dear friend, offering constant support, yet she begrudged my good fortune. Before Virginia could respond, Julian cut in, his voice rising as he frowned at me disapprovingly. We agreed you weren't going anymore. We're getting married soon. What are you thinking, leaving for an entire year now? We had been together for 3 years. Now that our jobs were stable, Julian's parents, eager to hold their grandchild, kept finding new ways to pressure us into marriage. My parents were reasonably satisfied with Julian, but held one firm wish. They hoped I wouldn't abandon my career for love. Their apprehension, it turned out, had been warranted all along. I smiled and said, "We're still young. There's no hurry to marry. This opportunity is hard to come by. I don't want to miss it. If I return with a promotion and higher salary, wouldn't that make for a better foundation when we do get married?" Julian, who rarely got angry, snapped, "Do you think I can't support you?" I didn't respond. After covering his car loan and personal expenses, Julian was left with barely a few $100s each month. And he expected to support me on just that? How he even managed to utter those words was beyond me. Seeing my resolve, Julian's face darkened. "Fine. Do as you please," he snapped before storming out. The door thundered shut behind him. Virginia feigned concern. "Melly, maybe you should reconsider? You're about to get married after all. Leaving now really isn't appropriate." I stared at her without expression and asked bluntly, "Finfin, are you standing with me or with him?" Virginia, who had always claimed to be my closest confidant, certainly wouldn't risk her carefully crafted persona now. She softened her voice, edging closer to placate me. "Darling, my loyalty's always with you. Honestly, Julian's utterly beneath you. Had I foreseen this wretched version of him, I'd never have played matchmaker to begin with." "But Melly," she shifted into a worried tone, "a year away really is quite long. Long-distance relationships are so unreliable. What if Julian—" I could tell from her expression that Virginia didn't want me to get the promotion or raise, yet she still wanted to keep Julian on the hook. She was torn between two conflicting desires. I lowered my gaze, hiding the mockery in my eyes. Let her keep this sort of man. Don't worry. Isn't this why I have you? I swallowed my disgust and grasped her hand, eyes brimming with masked sincerity. While I'm away this year, stay here and watch Julian for me. If anything comes up, just let me know. But Virginia feigned hesitation. I smiled and said, "Didn't you have your eye on that L-brand bag? Consider it your reward for keeping watch over Julian this year." I had always been generous with Virginia, always making sure to include her in every bit of good fortune that came my way. Yet in the end, my heartfelt sincerity might as well have been tossed to stray dogs. A flicker of delight flashed in Virginia's eyes, though she strained her considerate facade. "What's between sisters? Go ahead, and I'll keep a close eye on him for you." I nodded with a smile. Lost in the thrill of her new bag, Virginia never noticed the icy glint creeping into my gaze. Chapter 3. I had installed surveillance cameras in every shadowed corner of the house. Gone for a year, I was certain those two adulterous rats who'd been rutting under my very nose wouldn't abstain from their filthy urges. I'm not sure how Virginia convinced Julian, but on my departure day, he actually showed up at the airport to see me off, though his expression remained stormy. I feigned sorrow. "Darling, wait for me. The year will fly by," I murmured with downcast eyes, clutching my boarding pass until it crumpled in my trembling hand. Julian's face remained cold. "If you insist on going, fine. But you'd better figure out how to explain this to my mother." I pressed my lips together, secretly scoffing. Who'd have the explaining to do remained to be seen. Virginia shot Julian a glare before warmly embracing me. "Take care of yourself there, Melly. I'll miss you dearly." I nodded. I will." Then I leaned in, my voice a hushed murmur. "The bag's in your room already. Don't forget to look when you're home." Virginia's eyes lit up. With feigned reluctance, she waved goodbye as I stepped through the boarding gate under their watchful gaze. Only when the plane touched down did I open the monitoring app on my phone. As expected, the moment they arrived home, Those two shamelessly threw themselves at each other. My absence only emboldened them further. They defiled every inch of the house from living room to kitchen, testing every surface that could bear their weight in their disgusting trysts. Stifling my disgust, I saved the footage, applied some quick blurring, and forwarded it to Julian's family and friends group chat. Congratulations to my husband on scoring his new fling. I fired off the breakup text to Julian, blocking and deleting him in one swift move. The training in Nanchung was progressing smoothly. Freed from parenting Julian and Virginia, those overgrown man-children, I no longer had to drown in endless chores or agonize over daily meal planning. My days now flowed with serene simplicity. Until that day, when I returned home from work and found Julian with his parents outside my newly rented apartment building, all carrying numerous bags and packages. Julian's face darkened. When he saw me, he glared fiercely, only to be slapped across the back of his head by his mother Lynn. "What are you standing there for? Hurry up and apologize to Melly." She snapped at Julian with a stern expression, then immediately warmed into a smile when addressing me. "Darling, we've given him a good talking to. Won't you give our boy another chance?" she said, shoving the bags into my arms. "Look, we got these specially for you. Julian said they're your favorite things." I looked at the luxury-branded bags, a flicker of sarcasm flashing in my eyes. In our 3-year relationship, Julian had never bought me anything expensive. Instead, he'd constantly nitpick whenever I stocked up on essentials during the Double 11 sales. Women have it easy. You don't need to worry about supporting the family, while we men have to pinch every penny just to get by. I didn't want to argue, so I kept silent. But Julian, seeing I didn't push back, grew bolder. "Melissa, let's be honest. What bride-to-be splurges like you? Can't you manage a household properly?" Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "I've never spent your money. Let's not forget how freely you threw cash into your games. I never criticized you for that. What gives you the right to lecture me?" Julian's expression stiffened for a moment before he replied with forced conviction, "This is all for our future. Just think, once we're married and start a family, we'll need proper savings, won't we?" Though I was upset, considering how considerate he usually was, I didn't argue back. But a few days later, I spotted Virginia wearing a pair of Bulgari earrings. Taken aback, she hadn't even secured her job yet. How could she splurge on such luxury? I casually inquired. Virginia's eyes darted away as she casually fiddled with her earring. "Oh, these? Some lapdog got them for me. Decent, right?" I recognized the earrings. Later, I found identical ones in Julian's Taobao purchase records. When I confronted him with the evidence, he said, "My boss's birthday is coming up, and she's holding my promotion in her hands. I figured buying a little gift might grease the wheels. You were tied up that day, so I went to Virginia for advice." Julian hugged me. "Once I get promoted, I'll buy you one too." I quickly shook my head and declined. A pair of earrings that cost almost 10,000 yuan was way too extravagant, especially since I don't even have pierced ears. Hearing this, Julian hugged me tightly and declared grandly, "Once I get promoted, I'll get you anything your heart desires." Looking back, how is this any different from the empty promises bosses dangle before us? Oh, there is a distinction. At least my employer paid wages matching my work, but with Julian, I became an unpaid housekeeper laboring for free. Now that we've broken up, he's suddenly willing to splurge to win me back, I said coldly. "Uncle and Auntie, you've seen the video. I will never stay with a man who betrayed our relationship." Chapter 5. Julian immediately bristled, shooting me an indignant glare. "Do you realize you violated my personal privacy? I could take legal action against you." Before I could respond, Mr. N scolded him. "We're family, what's all this talk about suing? If you hadn't done such a disgraceful thing, Melly wouldn't have any reason to harm you." Mrs. Lin approached and tried to grasp my hand. "Melly, you and Julian have built 3 years together with such care. Just when your love should blossom fully, you'd cast it aside. What a heartbreaking waste." "Don't worry," she declared resolutely. "You're the only daughter-in-law I accept. Those shameless homewreckers out there will never set foot in our Rin family. If it weren't for that boastful email Virginia sent me just days ago, I might have truly believed their act. I pulled my arm away and said coolly, "Auntie, my relationship with Julian has reached its end. Forcing this any further would be meaningless." Seeing my unwavering resolve, Mrs. Lynn's face twisted, her voice turning shrill. "Melissa, after a year of living with my son, you're already ruined. Damaged goods. Who do you think would want you now?" I laughed bitterly. "By that logic, your son's far filthier. He's slept with multiple women. Who knows what disgusting diseases he's carrying?" I said coldly, "Get out now, or I'll call the cops and have you charged with harassment." Mrs. Wren's wrinkled face flushed crimson, her trembling finger jabbing at me. How dare you use that tone with me?" I gave a disdainful sneer and pulled out my phone, opening the photos Virginia had sent me. The photos showed Virginia and Mrs. Lynn walking arm in arm through the mall, their affectionate closeness resembling that of a biological mother and daughter. Birds of a feather flock together. You wear masks in front of me while cozying up behind my back. Absolutely revolting. I spat venomously. In the past, I constantly lowered myself before Julian's parents for his sake, sending them countless gifts every holiday season. And what did it earn me in the end? Even though they knew full well that Virginia was the mistress, they still treated her like family. Now they have the audacity to come crawling back, begging for reconciliation. This truly hit a new low for me. When Mrs. Wren saw the photo, she was rendered speechless, her eyes blazing with venomous hatred as they bore into me. Julian, who worked in the public sector and guarded his reputation fiercely, hurried Mrs. Lynn away in disgrace. I thought that would be the end of it, but the next day, halfway through my shift, I heard an uproar downstairs. A lunchtime crowd had gathered by the entrance, gawking at the scene. A colleague rushed over to me. "Melly, you need to get downstairs now. There's some woman claiming to be your mother-in-law sobbing her heart out and holding up a banner at the main entrance." Chapter 6. My head was buzzing as I snatched my phone and bolted downstairs. Melissa drained my son's life savings only to throw herself at her boss and abandon her fiancé. My vision blacked out. If not for a colleague catching my arm, I would have collapsed. I don't know who yelled, "Melissa's here," but the once impenetrable crowd abruptly parted like the Red Sea, creating a glaring pathway straight to my trembling figure. I stared at Mrs. Wren, kneeling on the ground with tears and snot streaming down her face, wailing as if her heart was breaking. For a moment, I even questioned whether I'd truly wronged Julian in some way. "Melly, my daughter-in-law." Mrs. Wren's eyes lit up when she saw me. She scrambled to her feet and rushed toward me, then slid dramatically to her knees before me, knocking her forehead against the ground while clinging to my legs with desperate, theatrical sobs. "Melly, have mercy on my son. For 3 whole years you've been together. 3 years he's poured every penny he had into you, enough to buy a proper home. How can you be so heartless, abandoning him without a second thought?" The old woman wailed, clutching at my trousers with trembling hands, her tear-streaked face tilted up in theatrical anguish. I never imagined an old woman could move with such fluid agility, leaving me no chance to dodge. The murmurs of the crowd around me kept creeping into my ears. "She looks all put together, but who knew her character could be so rotten?" Exactly. He spent so much money on her, was all set to marry her. Then she found herself a richer guy and drops him just like that. If she's backing out, the least she could do is return every penny. Exactly. What a disgusting gold digger. Some people were filming with their phones, declaring righteously, "Such people deserve to be exposed. Let the public see their true colors." I had lived over 20 years and had never encountered anything like this. Mrs. Lynn saw the crowd siding with her and cranked up the theatrics. "Melly, we don't hold it against you. But that money was our pension, the child's father's and mine. You blew it all on designer bags, and now we can't even afford our medication. We had to come to you." She wiped her tears with a pitiful expression, her shabby clothes looking like they'd been dug up from some forgotten corner. I struggled to rein in my fury. "Get up." "No, Zheng, I beg you. Forgive my son. Whatever wrong he's done, he truly loves you with all his heart." The crowd erupted in uproar. Auntie, why bother with someone like her? Take her to court and get your money back. Yeah, she'll do anything to climb the social ladder. What a gold digger. I can't stand the sight of her. She's disgusting. Amidst the surrounding insults, my mind steadily grew calmer. If what Mrs. Ryn said was true, she could have sued me for the money instead of making the scene at my workplace. Her true aim was never to make me her daughter-in-law. It was purely to humiliate me and tarnish my name. A clear conscience fears no shadows. If she wants a scene, I'll give her a show. We'll see who's left standing when the dust settles. With my hand hidden in my sleeve, I quickly pinched the tender flesh of my thigh. The sudden pain sent tears streaming down my face instantly. Auntie, you don't understand. It's all a misunderstanding. Julian was the one who broke up with me. I choked through tears. You claim he gave me that money, but I never accepted a single penny. As I spoke, I pulled out my phone and pulled up the 3-year expense records. Thank goodness I'd always kept track of every penny, or I'd never be able to clear my name now. Look, these are all the expenses from our 3 years together. I've kept meticulous records. The only things Julian ever bought me were a 99 yuan Valentine's bouquet and a 399 yuan silver-plated necklace. I shouted. I was the one who bought him the 4090 graphics card. Look, I never spent a single penny of his money. Mrs. Ryn stared at the itemized bills, a lump in her throat as she stammered incoherently. As the crowd began eyeing her with suspicion, Mrs. Lin scrambled desperately, swiping at her tears. If my son never spent money on you, then where's all our life savings gone? She wailed, her voice cracking with forced anguish. That's every penny we've sweat and bled for our entire lives. I grabbed her hand and declared earnestly, Auntie, let's call the police. They'll find out exactly where the money went. Mrs. Lin's eyes bulged with terror as she choked on her breath. And no police. I looked at her with feigned confusion, patiently reasoning. Auntie, I know folks from your generation are reluctant to involve the police, but as you said, this is your and Uncle's life savings. We can't just let it vanish into thin air without any explanation. Besides, it's a considerable sum. The police will launch an investigation promptly. As I spoke, I dialed 110 on my phone. Just as I was about to press call, the old woman scrambled to her feet and seized my hand. I pretended not to notice her trembling lips and asked deliberately, Auntie, what's wrong? Mrs. Lin gritted her teeth. Melly, I know you mean well, but there might be some misunderstanding between us. Misunderstanding? I drawled, elongating the word with deliberate skepticism. Yes, I'll go back and talk to Julian again. I'll ask him properly. I put on a troubled expression, and what about today, as situation, Mrs. Ryn pleaded hurriedly. This is my fault. Everyone, please leave now, just go. She hastily tore down the banner and fled, her tail between her legs. The crowd slowly dispersed, and a colleague gave me an admiring thumbs up. We thought this would drag on forever, but you wrapped it up in minutes. I smiled at her without a word. By the way, did your ex really only get you just these few things in all 3 years you were together? I nodded. My colleague wrinkled her nose in disdain. Stingy and broke, with his family acting like that. What on earth did you see in him? I pondered. Perhaps I believed he had integrity? Upon hearing this, my colleague's eyes widened in shock. You call that responsibility? I smiled, yet my mind drifted back to the day I first met Julian. Virginia had gone out to a bar one night, got drunk, and called me to pick her up. As I was hauling her drunken self out, we got harassed by some booze-reeking punk with yellow-dyed hair. It was Julian who saved us that night. Later, when Virginia mentioned setting me up with someone, I wasn't particularly keen, until I realized it was him, which caught me off guard. We hit it off immediately, sharing almost identical hobbies and interests. Suddenly, my phone's ringing jolted me from my train of thought. I glanced at the caller ID, Julian. Chapter 8. The moment I answered, Julian's reprimanding voice erupted from the receiver. Melissa, are you completely blind to my mother's heart condition? How dare you send her into such a state? I couldn't help but roll my eyes. Your mom started spreading lies and making a scene at my office first, you know? So what? Julian retorted defiantly. She's an elder. Is that any way to treat your elders? Enough, I snapped sarcastically. I don't have any of those drama-obsessed relatives. We're done, and there's not even a shred of connection between us now. Don't you dare disgust me with this nonsense. I heard Julian's labored breathing through the receiver, his rage practically steaming the line. The phone crashed down. A humorless twist touched my lips as I shrugged it off. A few days later, after presenting my report, my boss stopped me as I was about to leave. Xiao Jiang, you've done an excellent job on this case. I'm doubling your salary this month. Head to HR to claim it, along with your previous bonus. I frowned, sensing something unsaid. When I went to HR, the officer slid a termination notice across the desk. My palms tightened into fists. Why are you firing me? The HR officer shot me a quizzical glance and remarked, You really don't know? My brow furrowed. What am I supposed to know? The HR manager pulled out her phone and handed it to me. Here's that video that's exploded online recently. Take a look. I clicked on it and realized it was the video of Mrs. Ren kneeling and causing a scene outside my workplace. The video was edited to remove the beginning and end, only showing the middle portion where Mrs. Ren wailed miserably and loudly hurled accusations at me. The comment section was flooded with netizens voicing support for Mrs. Ren. Poor old lady. What heartless, which would stoop so low as to swindle a grandmother's life savings. Gold diggers like her are all over the place these days. I hope her whole family rots in hell. Don't cry, ma'am. Where can I donate? I'll send money right now. There was an endless stream of comments like these. The HR officer sighed helplessly. You see how it is. The company's under immense pressure. Our official Weibo account's being bombarded with hate comments over your situation. If we don't address this immediately, the fallout will be catastrophic. I tightened my fists. Please rest assured. Allow me 3 more days. If the issue remains unresolved, I will resign on my own accord. Chapter 9 that evening, I compiled all the evidence into a PowerPoint presentation and registered a Weibo account. While casually scrolling through the platform, I stumbled upon Julian and Virginia openly playing the victim in their live stream. Virginia, seizing the chance to ride the viral wave, posed as my college roommate online and accused me of bullying classmates, slacking off academically, and various other scandals. Well, she never flushes the toilet after using it. I kept wanting to remind her, but I just didn't know how to bring it up. To all the classmates who were bullied by her, I truly want to apologize here. I wanted to help them, but I was threatened by Melissa, so... Sobbing, I'm so sorry, everyone. Melissa sobbed delicately, tears threatening to ruin her flawless makeup. Yet, the moment a droplet strayed too close, she'd swiftly dab it away with a tissue. Yet, quite a few netizens still bought her act. Don't cry, sis. You're the real victim here. It's incredibly brave of you to stand up and expose her like this. When will these bullies just die already? By the way, that company still hasn't made any moves yet. What kind of connections does this Melissa have behind the scenes? I gritted my teeth and switched over to Julian's stream. He was using the same trick, playing the heartbroken character while subtly leaking more of my dark history. Julian was somewhat handsome, and when he looked into the camera with that emotional expression, he really did look like a character from a drama. Seeing comments like, Melissa deserves to die handsome, guy don't love her, love me instead, I couldn't help but laugh. My phone vibrated. It was a call from my parents. They had heard some rumors and were really worried about me. I reassured them and then contacted a popular influencer who was known for stirring up drama online. I told them I had even more explosive material that would easily turn the tide and guarantee them a flood of views. The influencer quickly agreed and set up a live stream for 7 p.m. the next evening. I made my preparations and waited for the show to begin. Chapter 10, as expected from a professional influencer, they released a teaser during the day, attracting a lot of attention. By the time the live stream started that evening, the number of viewers had already surpassed 100,000. I pressed the button to join the stream. Once connected, Facing the camera, I calmly said, "Hello everyone, I'm Melissa, the person involved in the recent kneeling incident." The comment section was immediately flooded with offensive language and insults. I continued, "Now I'm releasing the full video of the kneeling incident, along with a detailed list of all the money my ex-boyfriend Julian spent on me during our relationship." The two files appeared on screen. The comments froze for a second, then exploded in a frenzy. What the hell? So this is what the full video looks like? This family is crazy. He only spent a few bucks and still claimed to love her? The female lead even bought him a 4090 graphics card. "Who'll buy one for me, sniff?" Just then, my phone rang madly. It was Julian calling. I ignored it. Then someone in the comments said, "Even if this is fake, what about your college bullying scandal?" Your best friend herself said it. I chuckled. What best friend? The one who climbed into bed with my boyfriend while I was on a business trip? The whole chat was in shock. What? Climbed into bed? I quickly summarized how Virginia had stayed at my place while looking for a job and how those two had secretly gotten together right under my nose. My phone vibrated violently, full of abusive messages from Virginia and Julian. I turned a deaf ear and continued talking. My ex-boyfriend and my so-called best friend are both from the same hometown. They thought I couldn't understand their dialect, but what they didn't know is that I learned the dialect to win his parents over. I looked into the camera, a sarcastic smile playing on my lips. "So, how do you like Mr. Lin and Miss Ma's nurse uniforms and black stockings?" Chapter 11. The twist came too quickly, and the truth was too shocking. The discussion online continued for a week, and the heat hadn't died down. Julian was fired from his workplace due to issues with his personal conduct. His mother, who used to proudly announce, "My son is a civil servant," lost her bragging rights. Instead, she found herself the subject of gossip and criticism from relatives and friends, all because of the viral video. In the end, the entire family couldn't bear the pressure and fled back to their rural hometown. As for Virginia, I encountered her again in a bar. I had come to relax with some friends, but there she was, surrounded by a few greasy middle-aged men who were feeding her drinks. Several hands were groping her body. When she saw me, she instinctively tried to hide, but one of the men slapped her hard, cursing at her as he did. "You shameless bitch! I paid for your drinks and you dare try to hide." I looked at Virginia, now kneeling on the floor like a dog, and shook my head. Before leaving, I ran into her in the hallway. I didn't want to engage with her, but she called out to me, "Melissa." I turned and looked at her. "What is it? Why do you get to live so well?" She stared at me with jealousy. "Do you know, I never even liked Julian. I just wanted to make things difficult for you." I nodded blankly. Julian wasn't even her type, so I was surprised when they ended up together. She stared at me and suddenly smiled. "You don't know, do you? That punk from back then, Julian actually hired him on purpose to get close to you." After a long pause, seeing that I didn't react, Virginia lost it. "Why aren't you upset?" I tilted my head. Why should I be upset? It was just the realization that a rotten person was rotten to the core. What was there to be upset about? I didn't bother with a frantic Virginia, turning and walking away. The road ahead is long, and I have to keep moving forward step by step.